I was in my fourth year of high school. We had an overnight at our school after our CAT duties. It was one of those movie premieres and we had to do the flag color rights since the school was a sponsor. We reserved one of the rooms as our sleeping quarters. That building was for the fourth year students, so it was a bit little and was only 2 stories. So the guard locked that building for the night after the program, meaning nobody can enter nor leave that building. Around 1 a.m., I still couldn't gather my sleep. I was facing the door, which had a glass window, and outside was the hallway. I was able to close my eyes when I saw a dark figure pass by. It was but a shadow and in all black. I got frightened and hid myself in my sleeping bag. Pretty sure we were the only ones in the building that night. The guard already left home, and there are no teachers since they most likely went home after the program as well. I met one of my college friends, Eileen, when we got on the same jeepney ride around 2 years ago. We were talking about typical school narratives till we got to talking about our professor. It turns out that my professor and Eileen happened to reside in the same subdivision. She told me that she had recently discovered a funeral signage at the corner of their community. She was startled upon reading the name on the signage, so she searched for the funeral and got the shock of her life upon confirming that the professor had died. Eileen spoke with the professor's older brother, and he told her about the horrific incident that had happened to him. Our professor has hallucinated since the day of strangulation at the institution. He stated that he had been released from the hospital but could not see the true nature of his illness until an albulario checked on him. Our professor is believed to be highly skinny at this stage. He can't eat and can't speak respectfully any longer. According to our professor's older brother, the ghost that strangled him has a thing for our professor. She wanted to kill him so that she can be with our professor's spirit in the afterlife. He also claimed that our professor always tells them an address before he died. The address was said to be incomplete at first, but they were able to complete it one day. There they went and spoke to a lady. The professor's relatives introduced themselves to the lady, and when they stated our professor's full name, the woman was said to be astonished and afraid. They appeared to have had a lengthy story. When they were kids, the lady was the mother of our professor's ex-girlfriend. Let's just call the ex-girlfriend behind the name Selena. Both Professor and Selena were previous students at our university. That's where they first met, and it's also their last. In a story told by Selena's mother, it was Valentine's Day and they planned a date after class. Selena always arrives home earlier since our professor got more subjects than her. That day, Selena sat in our professor's class so they could go home together. Our professor left the room momentarily with her. Selena said, "Let's go home together." To which the professor responded, "No, you go home first. The class had just started." Selena was agitated and continued to pursue until our professor said, "Okay, here's the deal. I'll give you my Valentine's gift, but don't wait for me." When she opened the gift, She shouted, "It's beautiful!" and immediately wore the necklace with the engraved name on it. "I love you." 7:30 p.m. At the waiting shed. "I'll wait for you," she said. When she arrived home, she happily told her mother about our professor's gift. By 5:30 p.m., she was already dressed and left before 6 p.m. She rode a jeepney to their meeting place. As she was crossing the street, a speeding jeepney veered through her left side and she got hit. When the professor arrived at the scene, he couldn't see anything but a few curious bystanders. He asked around, and that's when he discovered what had happened. He wasn't sure if it was Selena, so he just went to the hospital. At the hospital, the professor confirmed that Selena had died from the incident. She was still wearing the jewelry he had given her, their name etched on the front, and "Till death do us part" engraved on the back. Our professor was devastated and wasn't talking to anyone for months after the tragedy. His sister continuously tells him that Selena does not want his life in ruin and he needs to move forward. This was when he decided to become a teacher. And the rest, you know. Oh, and the professor's cause of death was said to be bangungot, or nightmare. What bothered me most was if the woman who strangled our professor was really Selena. Why would she do that if she really loves him? So, I was at the boarding house owned by my lola in Barangay Palanan in Makati. I was alone and reading the newspaper. I suddenly heard a voice saying, "Larry." The voice sounded like a middle-aged woman, probably in her 40s, and the tone was a bit chilling. The voice called me in the same tone 3 times. I thought my lola just came home, but I was a bit confused because I know if she comes home from church, she would first knock at the gate. I was bewildered when I looked from where the voice came and saw no one. My body just chilled in fear, and as it did, another voice called me from around the garage in front of my room, where the previous ones felt it came from behind me. I immediately dressed up and went to Makati Cinema Square. It didn't happen just once. Eventually, I left the boarding house straight out of fear. Local folks would tell us about a white lady who would be seen in different places in our area, probably where she'll end up being towed by the wind. It started with my younger sibling. It was around 5 p.m. when he saw a lady not far away from where he was. It was sitting under the mango tree near the old municipal hall in our barangay. The lady was slowly walking, and he told us he was mesmerized by its beauty, and it was the first time he saw that lady in their area. It was wearing a white dress, he said. So he followed her. But as he was tracing his footsteps, he noticed that the lady also hastened hers until it disappeared into a concrete wall. He was shocked. He immediately went to the area where the lady had disappeared. That house had an eatery and served booze by the evening. He entered the eatery and asked the servants if they saw a woman in white enter their house. The servants responded, "None." He left confused, so he set it aside, but deep in his mind, he couldn't forget what had just happened. One time, my high school professor and CAT Corp commander went to eat and drink at that same eatery. They had a few bottles until later that evening, and so they decided to just go home before it gets too late in the night. When they were about to leave, he saw a woman standing nearby. He greeted him, "Good evening, madam," to which the woman responded with, "Good evening too." After that, he asked what she was doing there late at night, and she responded that she was waiting for a ride home. I guess he wanted to help, so he offered her a ride in his BMX bicycle. The lady said her home was just past the cemetery. He then offered his bicycle ride, to which the woman responded, "Thank you very much." As the two rode the BMX bicycle, the woman had been telling him stories on their way to her home. After biking a few hundred meters, he saw his niece off the road. She got curious, asking him where he was going. My high school professor said, "I'm on my way home. Just need to drop her off past the cemetery." His niece, both confused and scared, left off, and the two continued riding past her. As they continued down the road, my professor just kept on talking stories with the woman until he slowly noticed that it had gone quiet. By that time, an eerie silence had already enveloped him, and just noticed that he was already in front of the cemetery they were supposed to get past. Having been a bit drunk, he didn't pay much attention and just biked his way back home. The next morning, he saw his niece again and got asked who he was dropping off last night. My professor responded saying he was tending to a woman in white dress, to which his niece responded, "Uncle, when I saw you last night, you were the only one on your bike. I'm confused why you kept saying you were dropping off someone when it was clear to me you were on your own last night." There's this spirit of a man that haunts our room. My cousin would sometimes see it. We would sometimes be awakened by the sound of our vertical dish rack opening. Personally, I haven't seen it, but when I do, my body would just send shivers and would freak me out. My sister also told me she's been seeing it. So what we just do is sometimes talk to it and request that it doesn't scare us. We also do prayer sessions together with my mother when she occasionally visits us. We asked the landlady and other tenants around and said it probably was the man who rented the room before. He died in his sleep due to bangungot or nightmare inside that room. I'm from Alabang and have spent most of my life there. I grew up somewhere near the Metropolis Mall, now Star Mall. Yes, it is true that that mall is a previous cemetery. I had a friend who had a weird experience there. They had the movie analysis for a school project. Since they lived just near the mall, he decided to watch the movie there. The funny thing was, he went to the last scheduled full show. Just him, all by himself. So, in the movie house, it was already dark and the movie had just started. It was a comedy movie. When he arrived, he was surprised to see the theater full of people. But when the movie ended an hour after and the lights had turned on, he was shocked to see there were only a handful of them watching inside. It scared him, and from that point on, he never watched a movie in that mall again. I had another friend who worked in Metropolis Mall as a security guard. So around 7 p.m., there was this group of 10 guys who went inside the mall all wearing barongs. He laughed at them, thinking they looked like they were attending a wedding event. It so happened he was on duty till the closing hours. He got scared when those 10 guys in barong never left the mall. They just plain disappeared. My nephew, who was 3 years old at the time, was always sick. When we got him for checkup, his pediatrician wouldn't see any findings on him. Not one illness or anything. One day, our cousin from the province called and asked how our nephew was doing. We got curious since that cousin isn't really a close relative and had no idea that our nephew was sick. After greeting us and asking about our nephew, he said never ever leave our nephew by himself because someone is trying to get him, which he saw in a dream. Our 3-year-old nephew would occasionally point something out of nowhere, then would be terrified. Their house also had a room that he was afraid to go inside because he said someone was chasing him in there. Out of fear, he would sometimes sprint back to the second floor and lock himself on one of the rooms. These events only stopped when an albularyo went to their house. She performed rituals on the kid and saw several elements. Our cousin was right. There were really beings out to get my nephew. So the albularyo drove away the elementals, then wrote Latin-like scribbles on a piece of bond paper. These were placed on all the doors on that house. After the rites, the illnesses and the paranoia of my nephew never happened again. Last night, a friend told me 2 ghost stories. First is a story from the UST hospital. One night, a doctor was in a hurry to ride the elevator. He looked terrified and in panic. Inside the elevator, there was already a patient inside. So the patient asked the doctor, "Doc, why are you in a hurry?" The doctor replied, "That patient is chasing me. That patient is already dead. She has a red tag in her. We all know a patient is dead when it already has a red tag in its wrist." Then the patient said, "Like this?" showing her red tag on her wrist. Second is about the hanging lady. There's this guy who doesn't believe in ghosts in his dorm. The backstory was, there was this woman who committed suicide in that dormitory room by hanging herself. So, to prove the rumors wrong, he decided to wait for the ghost to appear. He stayed in the comfort room, and he waited so long that he eventually fell asleep in the cubicle. After a while, he awoke to the feeling of someone caressing his head. When he opened his eyes, he saw the woman hanging from the ceiling, her feet caressing his head and looking at him. This ghost story happened when we moved to a village in Cavite where my parents settled. I had my own room there. When I was in high school, I would sometimes hear someone preparing coffee in the kitchen. I would hear it because my room was directly beside the kitchen. I would cover myself in pillows when it happened until eventually it became music to my ears because of its frequency. A spirit warrior once came into our house and told me there was a capre living with us. We called him Big Boy and was already seen both by my father and brother through his shadow. To this day, it still lives there and won't leave because the spirit warrior told us it is guarding a treasure. We were tasked to set up the branch POS in National Bookstore Avenida, and we were told to set it up after working hours. So, we started around 10 p.m. and there were 3 of us then. Me, an engineer, and a programmer from our company. I was tasked to set up the hardware. The other 2 will set up the software once I'm finished. There were about 4 stations to be set up, plus the server. We end up doing the work until 4 a.m. in the morning. So, while we were setting up one of the stations, I heard the sound of a ball bouncing around the toy section area. I didn't mind and decided to continue. After a few minutes, I heard the same bouncing ball sound again. From where I was, there was this rack and I had to move a little to see what was in that area. Now curious, I decided to take a peek. I saw a kid holding a ball moving to the other side of the rack. I was a bit relieved, but I was confused why an employee would leave their child inside the building, not to mention at the middle of the night. I left the kid and continued setting up, thinking its parent would just be around and fetch him later. So when we finished, we had a few discussions with some of the bookstore staff before going home. Remembering the kid earlier, I asked them, "Was that kid playing in the toy section yours?" They replied in unison, "What kid?" I was shocked with their responses. That was when I learned that there really is the ghost of a kid appearing here. It appears even during store working hours. I don't know if that ghost of the kid is still in that bookstore. That was around late 1998.